Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes.
Yes.
Today we're taking a deep dive
Into
Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics.
Oh, right.
It's a classic for a reason,
Oh, absolutely.
but
yeah.
can be a bit dense.
It'd be a little tough to get through.
We're here to help you get the most out of it.
Yeah. It's amazing how relevant this book still is.
Really is.
Even though it was written centuries ago.
Yeah.
Aristotle was really grappling with some fundamental questions about what it means to live a good life.
Yeah.
To be a good person.
To be a good person.
And to find true happiness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to explore in this deep dive.
I like it.
You know, when you boil it down,
Yeah.
Nicomachean Ethics is all about this pursuit of happiness. But not in the superficial way we often think about it today.
Right.
Like,
Aristotle wasn't talking about fleeting pleasures or material possessions.
Yeah.
He believed that true happiness, what he called
eudaimonia,
was about living a life of virtue.
Okay.
Guided by reason.
Yeah.
And fulfilling your potential as a human being.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit.
Okay.
What exactly did Aristotle mean by virtue?
Yeah.
It seems like such an old-fashioned word these days.
It does.
Like, what is that?
For Aristotle, virtue wasn't about following a set of rules
No.
or commandments.
Not commandments.
It was about developing excellent character traits. Habits of behaving in a way that's aligned with reason.
Okay.
And leads to a flourishing life.
So it's not just about knowing what's right.
Right.
But actually putting it into practice.
Yeah.
Making it a part of who you are.
Precisely.
Okay.
Aristotle believed that these virtues, like courage, generosity, honesty, and justice, weren't innate qualities.
Oh.
They were developed through practice and habit,
Okay.
like learning a skill or honing a craft.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
You don't become a master pianist overnight.
No.
It takes consistent effort and dedication.
It does.
So Aristotle is saying that becoming a virtuous person is a similar process.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
He even has this famous quote,
Oh, really?
"We are what we repeatedly do."
Okay.
Excellence, then, is not an act,
Yeah.
but a habit.
That's a powerful quote.
It is.
It really emphasizes the importance of making conscious choices
Yes.
and cultivating those habits that lead to a virtuous life.
And this idea of habit is central to Aristotle's understanding of virtue.
Okay.
He believed that by repeatedly acting in accordance with virtue, we eventually develop a disposition towards those virtuous actions.
Okay.
They become second nature, so to speak.
So it's like building a moral muscle.
Yes.
The more we exercise it, the stronger it gets.
Exactly.
I like that.
And one of the key concepts Aristotle introduces is this idea of the mean.
The mean.
He argues that each virtue lies between two extremes.
Okay.
One of excess and one of deficiency.
Okay. Can you give me an example of that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Take courage, for instance.
Oh, what?
Aristotle says that true courage is the mean between recklessness, which is an excess of bravery, and cowardice,
Right.
which is a deficiency of bravery.
So it's not about being fearless in every situation,
No.
but about finding that balance,
Yes.
that sweet spot where you're acting bravely when it's calls for,
Right.
but not being foolish or reckless.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this applies to other virtues as well.
So other virtues.
Generosity, for example,
Yeah.
is the mean between extravagance and stinginess.
Okay.
Honesty is the mean between being brutally blunt and being deceptive.
So it's about finding that middle ground,
Yeah.
that balance point
Right.
where your actions are guided by reason
Yes.
and not by extremes.
Exactly.
It seems like it takes a lot of self-awareness and careful consideration
It does.
to figure out what that mean looks like in different situations.
You hit the nail on the head. Okay, good. Aristotle believed that reason was essential for determining the right course of action in any given situation.
So we're not just driven by instinct or emotion.
Right.
We have the capacity to step back, to think things through,
Yes.
and to make choices that are in line with our values and aspirations.
Exactly.
And that's what separates us from animals, according to Aristotle.
Right.
We have this capacity for rational thought and deliberation, which allows us to make moral choices and to shape our own character.
That makes me think of another famous passage from Nicomachean Ethics.
Oh, yeah.
Happiness depends upon ourselves.
Yeah.
It seems to imply that we're not just passive recipients of fate.
Right.
We have agency.
Yes.
The ability to influence our own well-being through our choices and actions.
Absolutely.
It all comes back to us.
And that brings us back to Aristotle's concept of happiness.
Yeah.
Eudaimonia.
Yeah.
It's not just a feeling or a temporary state of pleasure.
Okay. It's about living a life that's in accordance with virtue, guided by reason.
Yeah.
And that allows you to flourish as a human being.
It's a much deeper and more fulfilling kind of happiness.
It is.
Than just chasing momentary pleasures or external validation.
Yes.
It's about aligning your life with what you believe is truly good and worthwhile.
Exactly.
That's powerful.
And that's what makes Nicomachean Ethics so relevant today.
Yeah.
In a world that's often obsessed with instant gratification and superficial measures of success, Aristotle's message is a powerful reminder.
Absolutely.
That true happiness comes from within.
That's right.
From cultivating those inner qualities that make us virtuous and allow us to live meaningful lives.
That's awesome.
Picking up where we left off, it's fascinating how Aristotle applies this idea of virtue and the mean to so many different aspects of life. He doesn't just give us these abstract principles. He gets down to the nitty-gritty, exploring how these virtues play out in our everyday actions and interactions.
Yeah, you're right. He talks about everything from courage and generosity to honesty, wit, and even something called magnificence, which I have to admit I had to look up.
Magnificence is an interesting one. It's about using wealth in a way that's both generous and tasteful, avoiding vulgarity or ostentation. You could almost think of it as the virtue of being a good philanthropist, someone who uses their resources to benefit others in a way that's both impactful and appropriate.
So it's not just about throwing money around, but about doing it with a sense of purpose and discernment.
Exactly. And this highlights how Aristotle saw virtue as a kind of practical wisdom, a skill in navigating the complexities of life and making choices that lead to a flourishing existence.
It reminds me of that idea of phronesis that we sometimes hear about in philosophy. It's not just about knowing the rules, but about having the judgment and experience to apply them wisely in real-life situations.
Exactly. Phronesis is a key part of Aristotle's ethics. It's that ability to discern the right course of action in a particular context, taking into account all the relevant factors and choosing the action that's most conducive to living a good life.
So it's not about following a rigid set of rules or a one-size-fits-all approach, but about developing that sensitivity to the nuances of each situation and making choices that are informed by both reason and experience.
Precisely. And that's what makes Aristotle's ethics so appealing. It's not about some unattainable ideal or a set of abstract principles that are divorced from reality. It's a practical framework for living a good life, one that recognizes the complexities of human experience and encourages us to cultivate those virtues that will help us to navigate those complexities with wisdom and grace.
It's like he's giving us a roadmap for a life well lived, but one that acknowledges there will be detours and unexpected turns along the way.
Exactly. And one of those turns that Aristotle explores in detail is the importance of friendship. He dedicates several books of Nicomachean Ethics to this topic, recognizing its vital role in human flourishing.
You know, it's interesting that he gives so much attention to friendship. It's not something you typically find in philosophical treatises, at least not to that extent.
Right. But for Aristotle, friendship wasn't just some nice-to-have social perk. He saw it as essential to living a good and happy life. He even says that without friends, no one would choose to live even if they had all other goods.
Wow, that's a pretty bold statement. It really underscores how fundamental he believed these connections were to our well-being.
Absolutely. And he goes beyond just acknowledging the importance of friendship. He delves into the different types of friendships and their varying levels of permanence and value.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about these different types of friendships.
Aristotle identifies three main types: friendships of utility, friendships of pleasure, and friendships of virtue.
Okay, let's break those down. Friendships of utility sound like they're based on mutual benefit, right? Like colleagues who help each other out at work, or neighbors who borrow each other's lawnmowers.
Exactly. These friendships serve a purpose, and they can be helpful and important in our lives. But as Aristotle points out, they tend to be less permanent, dissolving when that shared utility fades.
Makes sense. And then there are friendships of pleasure, which I'm guessing are based on shared interests or activities, like friends who bond over a favorite sport, a hobby, or even just a shared sense of humor.
Precisely. These friendships can bring a lot of joy and richness to our lives. They're the people we have fun with, who make us laugh, and who share our passions. But Aristotle argues that they, too, are somewhat conditional. The friendship might weaken if the shared interests change or if the pleasure derived from the activity diminishes.
So those first two types of friendship, while valuable in their own right, are somewhat transactional. They're based on a kind of give and take, a shared benefit or enjoyment.
And that's why Aristotle elevates the third type of friendship of virtue above the others. This is the kind of friendship that's based on mutual respect, admiration for each other's character, and a shared commitment to living a good life.
These are the friends who really see you, who challenge you to be better, who celebrate your successes and support you through your struggles. They're the ones you can be truly yourself with, warts and all.
Exactly. And this type of friendship, Aristotle argues, is the most enduring and the most valuable because it's not contingent on external circumstances or fleeting pleasures. It's grounded in something deeper, something more intrinsic to who we are as human beings.
I love how he talks about how good people find mutual enjoyment and benefit in each other's virtue. It's like their goodness feeds and strengthens the friendship itself.
Right. It's not just about what they get out of the relationship, but about who they become as individuals because of it. They inspire each other to grow, to strive for excellence, and to become better versions of themselves.
He even says that a friend is a second self, which really speaks to that deep connection and understanding that exists in these kinds of friendships. You see yourself reflected in them, and they help you to see yourself more clearly.
And these friendships, according to Aristotle, are crucial for living a good life. They provide us with companionship, support, and a sense of belonging, but they also help us to grow morally and to become more virtuous individuals.
It's like having a built-in support system for your journey towards eudaimonia, that flourishing life Aristotle talks about. These friends are your cheerleaders, your confidants, and your accountability partners all rolled into one.
Exactly. They help you to stay on track, to make good choices, and to live a life that's aligned with your values and aspirations.
You know, as you're talking about this, it's making me reflect on my own friendships and the different roles they play in my life. I definitely have friendships that fall into all three categories, and I value each of them for different reasons. But I'm especially grateful for those deep friendships where there's that shared sense of values and that mutual desire to see each other thrive.
I think that's one of the great gifts of Aristotle's work. It encourages us to reflect on our relationships, to appreciate the different types of friendships in our lives, and to cultivate those friendships that are based on virtue and a shared commitment to the good.
It's a reminder that building and nurturing those deep, meaningful connections is not just something nice to have. It's essential to living a good life, a fulfilling life, a truly happy life. And that brings us to the final and perhaps most surprising aspect of Aristotle's concept of happiness, the contemplative life.
This is where things get really interesting. Aristotle argues that the highest form of happiness lies in a life of contemplation, engaging in philosophical and intellectual pursuits.
This is the part that always throws me for a loop. We tend to think of happiness as being active, engaged with the world out there, experiencing things. But Aristotle seems to be suggesting that true fulfillment comes from turning inward, focusing on the life of the mind.
And it is a fascinating dimension, one that might seem a bit unexpected at first.
Yeah.
After all, we often associate happiness with being out in the world, achieving goals, having experiences.
Right.
But Aristotle makes a compelling case for the idea that true and lasting happiness is also found in those moments of quiet reflection and engaging with our intellect. And in contemplating those big, enduring questions that have captivated thinkers for centuries.
You know, when you put it that way, it starts to make more sense. We've all had those moments where we lose ourselves in a book,
Yes.
a challenging problem,
Absolutely.
or a deep conversation, and we emerge feeling energized and fulfilled.
Right.
It's almost like we've tapped into a different source of energy,
Yes.
one that's not dependent on external circumstances.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Aristotle's getting at. He's suggesting that we have this capacity for intellectual and spiritual growth that's just as important as our physical and social well-being.
Yeah.
And by cultivating this part of ourselves, we can access a deeper and more enduring form of happiness.
He even goes so far as to say that this contemplative life, this engagement with our higher faculties, is the closest we can come to experiencing what he imagined the gods experience.
Yes.
It's like we're tapping into something timeless and transcendent, something that connects us to something bigger than ourselves.
Right. And it's not that we all need to become philosophers or hermits to achieve this.
Right.
Aristotle recognizes that we have practical lives to live, responsibilities to fulfill.
Oh, of course.
But he's encouraging us to find those moments in our day and our week where we can step back from the hustle and bustle and reconnect with that inner world of thought and reflection.
So it's about finding that balance, right?
Exactly.
Between the active life and the contemplative life.
Yes.
Between our engagement with the world and our cultivation of our inner landscape.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that both are essential for a truly flourishing life. We need those times of action and achievement, of connection and community. But we also need those moments of quiet contemplation, of intellectual exploration.
Yeah.
of simply being present with our own thoughts and allowing ourselves to be absorbed in the wonders of the universe.
It's making me think about how we often get caught up in the pursuit of external markers of success,
Yeah,
wealth status, achievements.
right.
But Aristotle is reminding us that true happiness is also found in those quieter, more internal victories,
Yes.
in the growth of our knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
the deepening of our understanding, and the cultivation of our wisdom.
And it's not an either proposition. We can strive for excellence in our careers,
Yeah.
in our relationships, in our communities, while also nurturing that inner life of the mind.
Absolutely.
In fact, those two pursuits can complement and enrich each other.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive into Nicomachean Ethics. It's a book that's challenged me to rethink my assumptions about happiness, virtue, and what it truly means to live a good life.
It has.
And I think it's a book that has something to offer everyone, regardless of their background or beliefs.
I agree. It's a timeless work that continues to resonate with readers centuries after it was written. Wow.
And I think that's because it speaks to something fundamental about the human condition,
Yeah.
our longing for meaning, purpose, and a life that's truly worth living.
So as we wrap up our exploration of Nicomachean ethics, I'd like to leave our listeners with a few questions to ponder.
Okay.
What does it mean to live a good life according to Aristotle? How can you incorporate his ideas about virtue, friendship, and contemplation into your own life?
Yeah.
And what small steps can you take today to start cultivating those habits and practices that lead to a more fulfilling and meaningful existence?
Those are great questions for our listeners to think about.
We encourage you to revisit Nicomachean Ethics and see what insights you can glean from this rich and thought-provoking work.
Yes,
Aristotle's wisdom has stood the test of time,
it has.
and we believe it can offer valuable guidance for anyone seeking to live a life of purpose, virtue, and true happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Until next time,
Yeah.
keep seeking true, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
I like it.